Morning, folks. I want to run through a quick live solution build with you today after some experience on the weekend. Test drove a few cars here in Melbourne and it seemed to be a bit of a common trend around the use of my nemesis paper. When you wanted to go for a test drive, you obviously had to consent to paying for fines or damage caused during the test drive, but the poor dealer would find the form on their laptop or desktop, print it, go to the printer, come back, you'd fill in the respective details, and then that piece of paper would get filed somewhere. It got me thinking that there's definitely a better way to do this, and obviously in a world of mobility and so on and so forth, we could probably use an Nintex form and a really simple workflow, or potentially more complex workflow to achieve this. So without further ado, we'll hop into Nintex Workflow Cloud. Before I start, I want to time this one because I think I can probably build it in around about 10 minutes. So let's have a quick kickoff. I'm going to start here with a form. Obviously, that form could be an anonymous form. So if you want to come in the dealership, you've got a test drive QR code potentially, and the Nintex form could sit behind that. That's one option. Or it could be authenticated, and you could pop that form on mobile devices, tablets of the dealers and the staff that work there. You sign on glass, and then they can sanitize that device afterwards, give it a wipe down, whatever. So we'll use that option. And what that's also going to allow me to do is save forms as we go through. Let's hop into the designer. For obvious reasons, I'm going to leave this one fairly unbranded and fairly generic, but we will pop in a label and some other information. So before we begin, the form that I'm going to try and sort of digitally transform is this pretty stock standard list of terms that you agree to, start date and time, some information about the vehicle and yourself. Now that's what would get printed off, that would what would get signed and then stored physically. So I'm just going to drag a couple things in. We want a label, we want an image, we want another label. We're going to have a yes, no control. We're going to have a group, and then I'll populate that in a bit. So my first label is just going to be my title. So we'll make that the test drive consent or disclaimer or whatever you want to call it. My image, I'm just going to grab this Cefalo logo. So nice to see Cefalo branching out from real estate to automotive. We'll just make that a little bit more manageable, maybe even smaller than that. My first label is going to be all of my T's and C's. So here we go, and copy paste this in too. And then my yes, no. So we'll just say, do you consent to the above? Make it a toggle, make it horizontal, maybe pop in a divider line and throw in a space. Okay, so my group is going to contain all my information. I'm going to have a rule that's actually hiding the whole thing. Once it gets clicked or unclicked, do you consent? If you don't consent, you don't get to drive the car, so there's no point proceeding. Start date and time is what I need, so I'll drag in a couple of date controls. 1, 2. So we'll say test drive start. And we don't want to hide the time, we want the time here. And test drive end. Okay. We want the driver's name. We'll say for insurance purposes, so on and so forth. So we'll say driver's name. Grab the license number, but we are going to take a picture of a license or upload a picture of a license as well. You could do things like state. If you wanted to drop down state, again, I'm going to take a picture of it or an address and so on. So just drag in the respective control. I'm going to do file upload. So we'll say license upload. We only want 2 max images, front and back. You can add a message as well if they exceed that. We want to know which vehicle, so we'll go with the license number or registration number. And most dealerships would have some sort of stock code as well, or an asset code. And you could use a barcode scanner for this if you've got a little barcode on each piece of stock. We'll say stock code. And then we need our signatures. So we'll have our driver signature. And we'll put a date in there. And we have got our dealer signature or salesperson or whatever. So we'll go dealer signature and a date. Okay, oh, done. What I really want to do is save this before they come back with the end. There's no point leaving a form open, might get closed, the app, whatever. So we're going to actually use the save function and do a real quick rule to show this whole group. So I'm just going to hide the group, create a rule, show the group. So if do you consent to the above is yes, then the group is going to be visible. Yes, otherwise the group is not going to be visible. Create the rule. Check the rule works. Looks good. Apply the changes. This one's not really about workflow. A lot of different things that we can do here. Obviously, we could upload it to a list in SharePoint if you use SharePoint. You could write it to a database if you're using Excel, SQL. If we really wanted to, we could add it all to an Excel spreadsheet somewhere or a weird and wonderful application that lives on-prem using RPA. We could generate a document. So we could use Nintex's document generation to generate a specific document. And what we could do is just look at that template that we had earlier on. So if I use my tagger, and I'll just drag in my template, what we could do is something like fill in all of the variable values with the tags. So say start date, end, start date and time, end date and time, so on and so forth. So all that information, store the template somewhere in the cloud, pop the variable information in when the workflow runs, and you've got a unique document. So even to the point of the signatures as well. So you could add those signatures in as images for the dealer and for the test driver. DocGen's covered at length in other videos as well as signature. If you want to make it very legally binding, you could generate that document and then you could get it signed using Nintex Sign. But what we'll do is we'll just send a validation email to the test driver. So just going to send an email. Recipient address. I don't think we grabbed the email, so what we'll just quickly do is pop in an email address for the driver. There we go. Driver's email. Pop that in there. Apply changes. So we'll just send an email to the driver. We could pop in a reply to address if you wanted to. So this could be the dealer that is working, or you could even, if you're capturing that piece of information in the form, pass that back. So follow Automotive. So I could say your test drive details, and then just configure the email. So say hello driver, test drive details below. Pop in the registration number, start, date and time, and the end, date and time. I probably would use a bit of a friendly, so convert the date to something a bit more friendly if need be. So I'd format that date to a string first, start date, end date, which means I can actually get something a little bit more friendly for things like email. So potentially use specific regional values, so on and so forth. But we'll just leave it as is for now. And that's all I really wanted to do. Publish, give it a name, and then we can stop the clock. Cool. So sub 10 minutes to get that built. Pretty simple. Obviously, as we said, we'd probably want to store the request. Let's have a quick look. So yes, I consent. Now if it was on a smaller form factor, it's going to stack for me, so it can still access that from smaller devices, mobile phone, tablet for instance. We'll pop in the start date. We're not going to do the end because we're going to come back and do that once we come back to the store. Let's just see what the end result looks like. License upload. I'm just going to drag in an image. Here, but if it was on the device, obviously that would be camera, registration number, stock code, get the driver's signature once we return. So we'll just save that. It's not going to kick off a workflow for me. The form's been saved. What it's going to do is going to pop that form into my Nintex. So off I go on my test drive. Jump back to my workflow cloud tenant, my Nintex. Got my test drive form here. I can come back in and fill it in. So really quick test drive. I've just been out for a minute. I've just done a quick lap of the car park. What I've done is I've actually forgotten to put the end time in my control. So there's a good quick change that I need to make as an improvement. Don't hide the time, apply the changes, and publish. Now it's time to sign. Signed it, dated it. And then if I'm the dealer, sign, date, and submit. I can open up my demo Outlook account. Sign in. And there we go. Did a little test before. And there's my information. Obviously, as I said, we make that friendly. But yeah, nice way to digitally transform a very paper-centric experience using Nintex Workflow Cloud, Nintex Forms, and potentially Nintex Mobile and DocGen. Thanks for watching.